Hello, everyone, and welcome back. So, what's on tap for today? Well, we're continuing the debates between Ana Kasparian of the Young Turks and Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire. This is part 3, and the question that they were asked is, are the culture wars, the culture battles, are they real or are they just contrived by the political parties? So we're going to get to all of that in the next few seconds. But before we do so, if this is the first time you've been here or you've already done so before, you're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your guest host. My name is Dr. Nasir. We'd love you to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, like, share, follow us, put down the comments below. Let us know what you think. So let's get to part 3 of the debate between Ana Kasparian and Ben Shapiro.
Earlier this evening, three of us had some interesting conversations about the way that our culture is broken, the way that civility has broken down. Let me give you a couple of numbers that are actually pretty scary. 15% of Americans have terminated a friendship over political differences. The reality is 53% of the R's have a Democrat friend, only 32% of Democrats have a Republican friend. Granted, a lot of that report is being related to former President Trump. Kevin Drum, who I don't know, but is a liberal journalist with Mother Jones, said, quote, "If you hate culture wars, blame liberals." He wrote that in Washington Monthly. Is it fair to blame more liberals for the culture divide, or is it one that both sides have to take blame for?
I think that both sides certainly engage in manufactured culture wars, and it's frustrating to see it. Full disclosure, I myself have engaged in it, and I think instead of being oblivious or delusional about it, it's important to acknowledge when you've made the mistakes, right? And so the demonizing doesn't help. At the end of the day, we have to realize that we're all Americans. We all want the same thing. Fundamentally, we are the same. We might have different solutions, different ideas. Demonizing.
I just have to stop this right now. Now, look, we all do that to a certain extent. I don't know about demonizing, but we all use sometimes certain languages. We call out people, call them just sometimes, stupid, idiot, moronic, retard. I mean, we utilize that, okay? So of course, we're in the media business. We want people to watch, but we obviously are offering our opinions, which we think are for the good of the country. When Ana here is talking about that fundamentally we want the same things, that is absolutely not true. We couldn't be further apart on big issues. Like, you know what? Taxes, low or high. Okay, all right. We can debate that. Policies, do we want, fair trade or do we want free trade? Okay, we can talk about those things. Policies in those things, I mean, is it going to harm some people? Well, maybe at the pocketbook. Maybe it's going to hurt a business or so, or help a business. But the fundamental dividing questions that we're talking about, when you're talking about gender, race, ethnicity, abortion, where do we come together on this? We just can't. There's no way we can. How do we come together on abortion? Where do we draw the line to compromise, to either abort or not to abort, to kill your baby, to not kill your baby? How do we draw that line there? How do we draw the line? Do we allow a man to go into a girl's bathroom? Do we allow a man to shower with your daughter in the shower in school? Do we allow a man to go into a YWCA or YMCA, take off his clothes or whatever and say that, he's a woman when it's Women's Day over there? Are these the things? Do we allow men to compete in girls' sports? I mean, these are fundamental difference. Don't tell me that we all fundamentally want the same thing. That's not true. That's why there are culture wars. Let's continue.
The other side doesn't help to accomplish any solutions. Again, we're seeing that play out in real time as we speak. I think that there's a market for the division, and that market is being exploited by our media. It's being exploited by politicians. Facebook is in the news today. I think that Facebook, it makes money based on engagement, and people are engaged in the constant conflict. So it's important to be honest about what the real threats in society are. I think it's important to focus on why it is that, certain industries, including the media, engage in this culture of division. And we got to talk about how the incentives are in the wrong place. I mean, there are no incentives to engage in, friendly conversation or friendly debate. I hate that my chair keeps, and I'm short, so I'm trying to figure out how to do this.
I don't know.
I hate turning my back to people. Here, I'll just do this. I'll sit on the very edge. But we got to be aware of why it is that people engage in the divisive rhetoric that they engage in. There's a profit motive behind it oftentimes. I see it play out in the media. It's really, really hard not to fall victim to it myself, right? But when I take a step back and I look at where the country is right now, it's shameful. We don't see each other as fellow Americans. We don't see each other as even fellow colleagues or workers in the workplace. Everyone has a political identity, and that's it. And that's not helpful. I think the division in the country is incredibly embarrassing, especially on a world stage, and we got to be more cognizant of that as we engage in political discussions.
I certainly agree with him.
You know what, folks? First of all, the world stage, Ana, listen, I tell people this all the time. I tell my wife this all the time. I tell my kids this all the time. I am, where we live in a community, the community is quite liberal here in North Carolina. All right? I mean, there's pockets where it's conservative. It just so happens that in the community, in the place where we live in, there's fundamentally, I've got a lot of liberal, progressive friends. And I am the red dot in basically a blue sea of liberalism. And I tell my family and I tell people, I don't give a darn. I'll tell you what, I don't give a damn what people think about me, what they say about me, whether it's in front of me, whether it's behind my back. I don't care what they say. I don't care if they say that, this guy loves Trump, that this guy is an absolute put America first person forward all the time, that this guy thinks that there's only two genders and there's only two sexes and abortion is evil and abortion is wrong. I make my opinions known and I stick with them. I challenge other people on their opinions. They challenge me on mine. At the end of the day, we're always maybe we can come to some agreement, but most of the time, you know what? I've got my opinion. When I'm right, I'm right. When you're left, you're wrong. I always say that all the time. Ana here, she's talking about on the world stage, it's a disappointment. Listen, I don't give a damn what I say amongst my friends and colleagues and people in the community and voice my opinions. You think I give a damn about what the world thinks? Let the world think what they want. We are the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States of America. God bless America. Wave that flag around every single chance you get. That's right. Trump, America first. That's what we're talking about here. The culture war, the culture divide, it's always going to be there. It's going to get progressively more and more divisive. It's not going to come close because we're talking on issues that have an emotional attachment. When you have issues that are emotionally attached, that are talking about your family, about your faith, about freedom, about children, about gender, about sex, about being born or being aborted. When you have got these emotional issues, the culture wars are going to be there. You're talking about, whether or not you kneel for the flag, whether or not, you can burn the flag, whether or not, all these issues are out there. And they are going to be part of the cultural divide. And that's the way it's going to be. And you know what? We play that up, obviously, when we're doing these shows. Everybody that's on the shows, if you're on the liberal side, you're making your liberal talking points. And you're hoping people will, come to your come to your entity, come to your show, come to your, company, come to wherever it is that, you're talking about in terms of your opinions. If you're on the right, you're a conservative. You certainly want to get your points across. You want people to, engage with you. You want them to hear your opinions. And then you're hoping that absolutely you form together. And now you've got a group. And there's another group on the opposite side. Discuss freely, talk about it, get people to come, and then let the market dictate where people are going to go to. That's what it is. The freedom of expression, freedom of ideas, let people decide for themselves, go to their separate groups, see if there's any commonality. If there is, great, work together. If there isn't, hey, that's just the way it goes. Anyways, let's hear Ben's response to this.
Enormous amount of what Ana is saying about the nature of sort of the world that we live in, where people feel as though they are going to be ostracized socially. They feel that they might be fired depending on their political point of view. They feel as though if they make comments openly, and this is true for pretty much everybody across the political aisle, actually, with the exception of people who consider themselves on the far left. According to a Cato study, basically every political subgroup in the United States feels uncomfortable speaking openly about what they believe, except if you're on the far left, because then you get to find people's old tweets and do that sort of stuff. But I'm not going to pretend that I think that the culture wars are irrelevant. I don't. I think that many of the culture wars are highly relevant, and not just relevant. I think that they may be indicative of sort of where the country is going. Because the way that most people experience interactions with the government, particularly the federal government or with politics generally, is not always based on tax rates or the very minute internecine debates that we have over $3.5 trillion bills that nobody knows what's in, and then everybody just votes before they read the thing. A lot of the way that people engage in politics. I'm sure we'll get into it, but I think that a lot of the ways that socially there's been a pretty strong push from the left over the course of the last 10 years in particular, and it's driven a lot of reactionary resentment on the part of people who are on the right. And I would suggest that a lot of the support for President Trump, for example, was driven by precisely that. It wasn't just about his economic program, which differed from sort of the traditional laissez-faire Republican economic program. A lot of it was about the idea that he was a culture warrior who was going to punish enemies and all of this. And so to pretend that the culture war either doesn't exist or that people are making it up in their imagination or that they are overestimating the impact of it on their life is to ignore how people are being treated in the spaces that they treat with every day, on Facebook, on Twitter, in the workplace. I mean, one of the reasons that my family and I left California is not just because of the living standard, although Florida is way better. It is also because we left a place where we felt as though our children were going to be socially ostracized for a place where we feel our children are not going to be socially ostracized, and that's a big thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, you actually brought
Now, Ben Shapiro basically, he masterfully basically breaks it down, as I was talking before when Ana, talked about, tried to make her point, is that Ben says, look, politically, we have differences or whatever. Okay, that's fine, but there's no emotion attached to it. But on the social fabric side of it, he's talking that's exactly where the culture war resides. And President Trump was a culture warrior. He was the one that fought back. Now, some people thought that he fought back too much. And the problem was that we had people before that didn't fight back at all. We had moderates like John McCain. Wanted to reach across the aisle all the time. I'm bridging a gap between the aisles. Okay, I'm bridging that gap. I want to be, bring everybody together, have a kumbaya moment. You can't do that with a lot of these policies that have an emotional attachment to it. Okay, like I said, we can argue on tax, we can argue on trade, we can argue on energy, all those other things. Okay, fine. But when you're trying to get on the cultural side, on the social side, what he talked about, gender, sex, bathroom usage, men competing in women's sports, when you're talking about abortion, all of these issues, okay, you can't be milquetoast about it like Mitt Romney and the others. You have to have a spine. It has to be an absolutely unbreakable, a titanium, vanadium spine. I mean, that's what you need to have. And President Trump showed us how you go on the offense every single time. You go on the offense and offense. You don't be on defense. You don't stay back on your heels. And that's why, in terms of this cultural war, the cultural battles on the social scale, they are going to be there, folks, because it is very difficult to compromise on things when you take a look at it and you're trying to invoke and say, you know what you're saying is absolutely crazy. It's delusional. It's unnatural. It shouldn't be. We can't let kids, like, for example, you can't let kids decide at the age of 7 or 8 that they want to self-mutilate themselves to become the opposite sex. But on the social scale, there's people who say, no, that's perfectly fine for children. That's perfectly fine for minors. They can make that decision. The brain isn't only fully functional to someone's 25 or 26. But no, go ahead. It's okay for a 5, 6-year-old to tell mommy and daddy that they want to have, gender reassignment surgery. I mean, this is the way. But so there is, for people, for example, the people would say about Christmas, Merry Christmas. No one's saying it. It's Happy Holidays again. Can't say Halloween anymore. It's, Happy Candy Day. You can't have, you can't have a Christmas special. It has to be the winter solstice festival. I mean, this is a Judeo-Christian country. It doesn't matter. There are other religions inside here, but primarily it's a Judeo-Christian country. The social warrior factors are always going to be here. We're always going to be battling those. Let's go on here. What I think Anna is going to have a reply to this.
Brought up a few issues that I agree with. Number one issue is the constant policing of people's pasts, what they've said in the past. I think holding people to the current standards based on the current culture. If you're looking at tweets, for instance, from 2009, and you're judging that tweet based on what the current culture or the current standards are, it's a little ridiculous, right? So going around demonizing people based on their past statements, it shuts down a conversation that could be had, right? A conversation about, oh, hey, look, society has actually progressed on this, and look at what was okay. I mean, you have late night hosts who were in blackface not too long ago, right? But the culture has changed. I think that, society as a whole, not everyone, but society as a whole has realized, oh, well, blackface has a pretty terrible history, and maybe it's not a good idea to dress like that as like a cute little Halloween costume. But beside the point, I don't think that the culture wars are fake. I think the culture wars are taking place. The point that I'm trying to make is that oftentimes, whatever the culture war is of that moment, it is manufactured as a distraction. A perfect example will be, critical race theory, which is not taught in elementary schools. Critical race theory is a graduate level curriculum. And the fact that it's turned into some weird, we need to ban critical race theory in elementary schools, it's ridiculous and a massive distraction that I think is intentionally meant to be a distraction from what people are really feeling frustrated about. The precariousness of their lives, of their work lives, the fact that people feel overworked, that they have no control over the work that they're doing, that they feel alienated over the work that they're doing. These are very real issues, and I think that, the fact that it's really largely been ignored by both the press and the very political leaders who were elected to represent them in the first place has led to the anger that we're seeing bubbling up both on the left and the right.
Ben, I think you wanted to make a couple comments.
Okay, I gotta stop this right here, okay? First of all, Anna, you talk about it's alienated workers. It's alienated people who do their work. People are upset at the work that they're doing. You go to work, you have a damn job, you got to do it. If you don't do your job, you're going to get fired. If you don't like your job, go someplace else. Find a job, find work that you like. That has nothing to do with the question of culture wars. What the hell does work have to do with culture wars? Has nothing to do. Unless, of course, the work that you're doing is itself involved in a cultural war, battle. That's a different story. I could understand that. All right? But then go back to the beginning of what Anna said. I mean, there is some agreement there. She was talking about, texts from the past, writings from the past, and we're judging people on that. Somebody said something before, made an off-color remark, made an off-color joke. First of all, people have to understand, it's freaking humor. It's intercoursing humor. Figure out what I'm using when I'm using the word intercoursing. Because I don't want to say the F word, of course, But that's what we're talking about here. So on that level, on the cultural war, on a cultural battle, there's some room for agreement there, I think, on the right and the left. The problem is The left doesn't want to do that because they want to go after it. And just like Ben was saying, groups don't want to speak out because they're afraid. Remember, it was a Trump voter when supposedly when they were being called and they were being asked who you were going to vote for, and they were being polled. They basically kept quiet, or they didn't say anything, or said it's the other guy. They lied about it. The silent Trump majority. And a lot of people didn't want to get into it. Like I said before, I don't give a damn. I tell people exactly who I voted for. I tell people exactly who I'm going to vote for. I tell them why. I am a Trump supporter all the way, conservative America, MAGA first, America first person. And I don't give a damn what people say about me. If they want to be my friends, fine. If not, hey, don't let the door hit you on your derriere on your way out. Okay? But what I'm saying though is that, like Ben was saying, is that these are the places where you are going to try to at least you've got to figure out where you're going to pick your battles on that social fear. Getting back to Anna's point, where we were saying we're in agreement. Absolutely. You know what? Past things, let's not bring those things up. Cancel culture, that's coming from the left. I would like to know of an example of it coming from the right, of cancel culture. Maybe it's out there. Hey, put that down in the comments if you think so. I'd like to know some examples of cancel culture where the right has tried to cancel the left from speaking out. So on that part, there could be some agreement, with Ana. Then she's talking about, critical race theory. And she's saying, this is manufactured again. They're not teaching critical race theory. It's semantics. Of course, they're not teaching the critical race theory that they're teaching in colleges, at universities, that they were doing at Harvard, at Yale, and other elite institutions or other institutions, colleges and universities around the country. All right, they're not maybe calling it critical race theory dynamics, critical race theory in modern America, critical race theory, how it started, where it's going. That's not what they're talking about. The critical race theory that these guys are talking about, it's subtle. It's subtle. It's in books. Ibrahim Kendi, this black racist, talks about babies are racist, talking about, that you need to segregate society, that every single thing that is talked about, every single thing that you do, when you breathe the air, the food you eat, who you look at, how you talk, what you hear, what you say, what you speak, it's all involves race and prejudice. And it's all meant to be on one side the oppressor, one side the oppressed. And they're teaching children right now that, guess what? Your skin color dictates. If you're the oppressor, you're the oppressed. Your skin color dictates whether you're going to succeed or not succeed. And they're doing it very, very subtly, these teachers, with books that are there for children, for teachers to read to children, for them to ask them questions, to segregate them, to tell them, you're white, you were an oppressor. He's black and brown, they were the oppressed. That's what's going on. So Ana, this is not manufactured. They're absolutely doing it. And you have your head in the sand because you're a progressive and you don't want to, partake in it or understand it or realize that it's happening. Anyways, let's continue with Ben's response to this.
Yeah, this will be a very quick note. I obviously disagree with you about critical race theory and whether it is taught in the public schools. Critical race theory, which I studied in law school, it started off as a legal theory, but it has an element of praxis that was meant to be implemented, which is why it is taught in education schools as well, and why
in elementary schools.
Yes, a very boiled down. Ibrahim X. Kendi is preaching a very boiled down version of critical race theory, and his book is assigned in elementary schools. The fact is that when you are having elementary school students who are having to check off boxes with regard to their race and then explain to each other whether they are historically privileged or not in 4th or 5th grade, that's a very dumbed down version of critical race theory. There's sort of a game that gets played with regard to legal theories that end up being boiled down. Intersectionality is another great example of this. Kimberly Crenshaw writes a very intelligent law review article about intersectionality and how you can be a member of more than one minority group and be discriminated against in a variety of ways. And then that is used as the basis for a much broader move in American political life. And then as soon as you point that out, they say, well, that's not intersectionality, it's the original law review article. That's a bit of no true Scotsman games playing. And so I object to that. And look, it is a relevant issue when you have Terry McAuliffe, who's running for governor of Virginia, literally saying in open debate that it should not be parents who are making the educational decisions for their children. It should be the people in education. I mean, that is a culture war issue that I think is of key importance to people who have kids, right?
Well, see, I mean, I think that that's part of what leads to the lack of trust in our institutions. I mean, yes, as a parent, you get to make decisions about which school you want your kid to go to. If you're uncomfortable with the public school curriculum, you can take a look at private school options. If you don't want that, you can homeschool. But who gets to be I mean, if we're talking about parents making those decisions, who gets to be the arbiter of, which parent gets to be the arbiter of what gets taught in any particular public school? I'm not really buying that they're learning about critical race theory or even a boiled down. I'm positive that, elementary schools are not learning about systemic racism. And even if they are, even if it's a boiled down version of that, learning about systemic racism is important. I think that that's something that's an issue in this country that gets ignored or completely denied, and I think that's wrong. I think that's what also leads to the division that we're experiencing.
Well, that's going to be the major culture war.
Boom, there it is. When was the big R going to be brought up? When was the big B going to be brought up? Bigotry, R for racism. Oh, just like you said, Ana just said, I don't. Again, Ben laid it out. She has her head up, her head in the sand, and she just doesn't want to hear about it in terms of critical race theory. And then she says about the parents. You know what? She's not for that. I don't know if she has any children. I don't know if she's married or not. But I'm just wondering and saying that, first of all, for Terry McAuliffe to say that it is not up to the state to teach my children things other than what they're supposed to be taught in school, which is, English, reading, writing, mathematics, science, geography, history. And now we can decide, okay, and those things are put out there. But they don't need to be talked about in terms of gender fluidity. And if you want to do that thing, make it an elective of some kind or whatever. And have parents be allowed to, the kid they want to send there, let them, like what they used to do in health before. Sign a little document. Yeah, you know what? My son or daughter can be there. They separate them out. Boys on one side, girls on one side. Go to health class. Learn about everything. I mean, you know what? Or do them together, whatever. But those can be electives. They do that all the time. You've got your mandatory classes. Our kids can't read, they can't write, they can't speak properly, they can't do math problems at an appropriate age level for their grades. But yet, we want to start dictating to them about proper use of pronouns. They don't even know what a noun is. But you know what? Let's talk to them about pronouns. Let's talk to them about, gender. Let's talk to them about sex. Let's talk to them about gender fluidity. Let's talk to them about changing genders. Let's talk to them about, gender affirming care. Let's talk to them about, what bathrooms you're going to use, what clothes you can wear, what clothes you can't wear. Let's talk to them about intersectionality, all these other things that don't have anything to do with learning, going out there, finding a great job, okay, progressing with life, nothing like that at all. That's what that's a state that God says, and it's fine for other people. Yeah, let the elites, let the teachers, let the state teach our children what needs to be taught. And the parents, it's none of your damn business. Stay out of their way. The state's got your children. That's what Ana is basically arguing.
Issue, right? Because the fact is that I, as a parent, believe that if you're going to teach...
You think there's no systemic racism?
I believe that it depends on how you define systemic racism. So if you're talking about legal regimens of racism, no. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about history has after effects, of course. So I think there's a real problem with semantic overload in a lot of our political conversations. And when people say systemic racism, sometimes what they mean by systemic racism is history has consequences. You can't have 150 years of, 300 years of slavery followed by Jim Crow and that not have after effects, which of course is true. And sometimes what they mean is that every inequality in American public life is due to some systemic inequity that is currently taking place in the United States, which I think is absolutely 100% false.
I mean, we certainly see that playing out in our criminal justice system. Are you going to deny that, or are you going to say that, let's say, African Americans or Latinos are just inherently more criminal or
I'm not going to say either of those things. I'm going to say
right.
that
So
as
why
an
are they
unfortunate-
overrepresented in our prisons?
I mean, this may
especially
be-
when you
this
consider.
may-
The reason that they're overrepresented in our prison is because they're doing more of the crime. That's why. That's exactly why. Blacks are doing crime at much, much greater levels than whites. Hispanics are doing criminal activities and committing crimes at much, much greater rates than whites. Why is it, for example, that you would see like Asians aren't as high in terms of that? Why is it that people from India, people from Pakistan, people from why? People from Europe, why aren't they doing criminal acts? Because culturally it's different. The culture, the environment, lack of fathers in the family, lack of parental teaching, lack of teaching morality. All of those things have an effect. That's why you just lost big on that one, Anna.
Maybe beyond the scope of our conversation, but the answer is because not all groups commit crimes at the same level. That has nothing to do with genetics. That has everything to do with circumstances.
Could you guys hold those
politics,
thoughts on
culture.
education? Because I do want to get back to some of that too, but let me move on to something.
So anyways, that was a pretty long thing there. I know I got a little bit, overzealous with the reaction, but I just want, what's up? I'm sure you guys were the same way, right? You want to basically, get into the video there and you want to be up on that stage and saying the same thing and countering the points in terms of the culture wars. So again, there's a divide there. There absolutely is. There's a progressive, moderate, socialist, Marxist, divide between that and conservatism. It's going to be there. It's going to stay there. The divide is going to get bigger. Maybe we can build some bridges of commonality on certain issues, but not when they have some emotional attachment, as I talked to, before. So this one here, I believe, Anna had some of her points, but boy, you know what? When you talk about it, that's not the points, all right, that are formed from the conservative side. And if you look at what Ben was talking about, he was basically making a case that, yes, there are demarcations. There are places where the culture war, the culture battles are extreme. And to basically poo-poo it or to say, I don't believe that that's really happening is basically, as I said, is sticking your head in the sand or sticking your head up the derriere someplace, all right? So I give this one here, part 3. This one goes to Ben Shapiro as well. So far, it's Ben Shapiro 3. Ana Kasparian comes in with the big 0. All right, thanks for watching. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your guest host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscription button, hit that notification bell, like, share, and follow us. Let us know in the comments below. What do you think? Do you agree? You disagree? Love to hear your thoughts. And I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. We'll see you again next time, folks. Take care and stay safe.